So, all I'm saying is that when Body World does it, it's an exhibit. And when I do it, it's some sort of crime against humanity. Like, there ain't no justice in this world. Like you download a few Mexican sugar dancing videos, and you got into some trouble with the law for that, didn't you, brother?
Yeah, I mean, just a few of them, and suddenly I'm a weirdo. I mean, I'm not the one who made them.
Yeah. And I tell you, okay, now Louise Frampton, she's talking about Amish porn. I tell you, the problem with Amish porn is that all that sex might just lead to dancing,
The problem with Amish porn is when a woman spreads her legs, it looks like a grilled cheese sandwich is being pulled apart.
This porn, there's too much of the fucking. I want to see the girls work the fields first. Get the sweat on their brow. Folks, it is Sunday, and this is the live stream, and I am joined by my good friend, the Bechtloff. Thank you very much for being here, brother.
Well, I'm usually working Sunday, but things are all screwed up because of the holiday, so.
And as usual with the Sunday live stream, this is going to be more of an informal one. I don't so much have show notes as I have, I'm so freaking exhausted, but I've been thinking about stuff for the past few days. And the loose topic for this conversation is hating America for all the wrong reasons. Because I think this is a great time to address this, especially with Bechtloff here as an American. And, I missed the first half of your live stream on Friday. You were talking a bit about Black Friday, weren't you?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of those odd American things. I swear, 10 years ago, I'd never heard of Black Friday. It was only with the advent of the internet that I started hearing it, and now everywhere in Canada is doing a Black Friday event.
Well, yeah, even here in America, I mean, when internet sales got, and the brick and mortar stores got a little more desperate, it's when it became a bigger deal. It used to be, Black Friday 10 years ago was stores open Friday morning super early, like 3 or 4 in the morning. Now it's pushed back to where it's like 6 in the evening Thanksgiving Day.
Well, and you have these massive lineups at the stores, and yet for every business that opens, 3 businesses close in America right now. And I assume the same thing in Canada and Europe and so forth.
Yeah, it's rough.
Now, there's this attitude that you'll get with, especially with Canadians, but I think throughout all of Western civilization, Australia, Europe, this really generalized hatred of America, which just ticks me off. Like the things you'll hear from Canadians is, oh, you go to Europe, and when they hear you speak English, they don't like you until you say, hey, I'm Canadian. Then they're like, oh, we like you. We just don't like the Americans. There's this, yeah, I'm sure you Americans are relatively aware of this enemy, this anger at America. And it's inevitably everybody I talk to, whenever this anti-Americanism comes up, it's well, you know what? It's the politics of envy. The reason people throughout the Western world hate America is not for all the good damn reasons for hating America, but because of all of America's virtues.
Yeah, I've never bought into the Europe is so much more sophisticated, and we should all look to Europe as some sort of model, like a lot of the leftists push. It's like, yeah, maybe when it comes to wine and cheese, we should look to Europe to teach us something. But when it comes to actually how to run a damn country, I mean, America certainly has its faults, but in a mere 200 years surpassed 1,000 years of progress on Europe's part. And we were doing something right there. And also, while we're pretty steeped in the political correctness, I'm not up to my armpits in sand people right now. So maybe we're doing something nice there.
Well, you know what? That's the thing. America is both I would say it's the least racist in the really negative sense. It's the least racist country when it comes to just like blind hatred of other people. And yet it's also the best it's the least politically correct towards other races, which actually isn't a contradiction. Political correctness comes from multiculturalism. And that's the thing. As much as the university profs in the United States love multiculturalism, It's the rest of the Western world that practices it.
I would say America's greatest strength, and perhaps in some ways greatest weakness, is that as a country we were as close to a meritocracy as you could possibly humanly get. It's not to say there wasn't nepotism. It's, everybody has, opportunities beyond what they've earned and all that kind of stuff. But as close as you can get, we were a meritocracy for all the good and bad that comes with that.
Well, and I'd say if there's one, like guys, I said hating America for all the wrong reasons, and yet these same people love America for all the things they should hate about America. And if I were going to point towards one big problem, it's and this is coming from a guy that loves America. Okay, I love you guys. It's a great country, and I might permanently immigrate there someday. It's the consumerism. I was having this conversation with my friend about well, a big part of it is shopping in America. See, I was talking with about a year ago. Aaron Clary had me on his live stream, and I was trying to get this message across. It didn't really click with him about why I can't stand shopping at Walmart. Specifically for the food, but I don't like Walmart in general, but the food at Walmart. This is so typically American in that everything that they sell in Walmart has sugar added to it. Like you try and find natural peanut butter, which, by the way, natural peanut butter is just made out of peanuts. There's nothing else added to it. You don't need to add anything else to it. You can't find that at Walmart. You try and find cranberry juice or grapefruit juice, and it's all stuff that has sugar added to it. And I think all of this, I think this comes from the consumer culture, the rabid capitalist culture, which is a complete overthrow of tradition, like completely dropping tradition, forgetting about how we used to do things and saying, hey, I invented something brand new. Should I have invented it? Who cares? Let's see if I can market the damn thing. This is kind of the message of Jurassic Park.
I said, we were as close to a meritocracy as you can get for good and bad. And the good thing about a meritocracy is it'll generally lead to a great amount of prosperity and innovation. But the downside of that is that can lead to consumerism, and occasionally can lead, that thirst for innovation can occasionally lead to just a blind thirst for novelty.
Exactly. It's a balancing act between tradition and innovation. And I would argue that America maybe it leans too far into the consumerism, and it forgets how things used to be done. And so everything is a radical social experiment. And the past is constantly having a new parking lot put over top of it. And so, like the shopping is just one of the frustrations. And like, this is not some huge thing that Canada's absolute, but it's, like when you talk about demographics, when you talk about bell curves, one standard deviation is actually kind of a big deal when you're talking about the whole demographic. And so, Canadian food versus American food, you're not going to find a huge difference in the grocery stores, but the average difference is just enough that you do wind up eating much, much better in Canada, which I believe that is probably what's behind the obesity epidemic down south.
Oh, absolutely. And again, America's biggest problems kind of come from, as to Bain post a little bit, victory has defeated you. It comes from the excesses of success. I mean, the other day I was on my stream and I was talking about, sometimes when people rail too much against the modern world, you got to do at times step back and realize you're largely blessed to live in the time and place you are. And I said, the grocery store is a miracle. Your ancestor from even 100 years ago would take one look at a modern grocery store and change places with you in a moment. But at the same time, when you're trying to eat well and all, you become aware of the fact that, 90% of the matter in this grocery store is corn syrup.
Well, I mean, that's the irony that America's biggest problem is that its poor people are overfed.
Yeah, this is one of the first times and places in history where it's,
which ironically,
the poor are fat. It's become expensive to eat properly.
Yes, expensive and difficult, because once again, it's You know, when I was down there, if there wasn't a grocery store close to you, you know, maybe Walmart's the only damn place you can shop, unless you feel like driving all the way across the city and trying to find somewhere, you know, or going to one of those really expensive organic shops. Trying to find a decent, like a Safeway, for example, is difficult in some areas because the nearest Safeway is 45 minutes away, whereas a Walmart is 10.
Yeah.
And I guess you can kind of see this too with the oh, and then by the way, this is infecting other cultures as well. Okay, it's America's the hotbed of it, but we're just as bad here. You know, like I've heard about this damn iPhone 10 about 30 times in the past couple weeks. Why the hell do you need a new iPhone? What the hell does the new iPhone do different than the current one?
It's a status symbol.
And I don't even understand how it's a status symbol because, like, if you buy a BMW, it looks like a BMW when it goes really fast, right? If you buy an iPhone 10, it's the exact same phone that you had before, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, but it's got a 10 on it.
It's got electrolytes. It's got what plants crave.
This dial goes up to 11.
Oh God. Oh boy. So, you know, it's the sad thing is that even though like there are these traces of tradition that you'll find in Canada, in Europe, and whatnot, like there is a little bit more. Yeah, I saw somebody, apparently Stefan Molyneux was harassing Faith Goldie by asking her to define Canadian culture. Is there a Canadian culture? And the problem with Canadian culture is that it's been whitewashed. It's been bleached. It's there, but it's only hanging by a thread. Because everything that used to be Canadian culture, well, Trudeau Sr. absolutely destroyed all of that. And well, I'll tell you what Canadian culture is. It's red Toryism. It's a form of monarchist conservatism where, at the same time, as conservatives as we are, we look after the lower classes. We ensure that they do well economically and morally. And it's a respect for politeness and civil behavior, not obsequiousness, which is what a lot of Canadian so-called politeness has become. Not obsequiousness, but actual politeness. The same sort of politeness you get in a saloon full of armed cowboys. And hard work. Honest to God, hard work. Working with your hands, hewers of wood, drawers of water. That's Canadian culture. And there's elements of it there still. But Canadians don't have words for it.
I think the two biggest things that helped that really wrecked the American culture and perhaps the last century of time is the welfare state, because America was, again, as close to a meritocracy as you can get, and it was, you know, not too long ago in this country's history, people would leave a relatively comfortable East Coast town and go out west to quite probably die a horrible death, but quite possibly make something wonderful, you know, to tame the frontier. And so there's no sense of that hard work, of that work ethic, of that kind of mentality here anymore with the welfare state. It just really undermined that. And then, in a way, undermining the space program was kind of a big deal, because America has that frontier spirit in it. You know, I mean, we had to, in rather short order, we had to tame a whole big old continent. And while I actually think private enterprise will have far more success with any kind of space exploration, something about NASA's mere existence was good for the nation. It gave us a sense of a new frontier.
Well, and see, this is where from the perspective of a red Tory, there is a time and a place for a crown corporation. The British East India Company was organized by the state as a private company to earn profits, and it helped civilize India. If not for the East India Company, The Indians would still be slaves to the Muslim rulers. They would still be a complete backwater with no highways and no map of the country. And, well, I mean, I guess they still have designated shitting streets no matter how you square that circle, but they'd have more of them, is the point. And so something like NASA is, you know, from the Red Tory perspective, that would be a sort of crown corporation where, yeah, like space travel is really freaking expensive. It's barely freaking possible. Okay, it's like when Canada was building its transcontinental railroad. All right, we mooched off of the British for that. That's why we didn't separate from the British, because they were paying for our railroad. And something like a transcontinental railroad really made Canada as a country, and yet it was the sort of thing that couldn't have been paid for merely by private enterprise at the time. It's a sort of investment that if Canada hadn't built the Transcontinental Railroad, British Columbia and Alberta would be in American hands, which, you know, for, you know, maybe that'd be better. Except my family, you know, immigrated to Ontario, so wouldn't be good for me. We wouldn't have the oil patch. We wouldn't have 2 coasts of water. We wouldn't have had all of this if not for the government investment in the railroad. And Lord knows that America has benefited tremendously from the highway system, which was mainly built for World War II and military operations. And the same damn thing goes for NASA.
Yeah, you're dead on. Space travel is not feasible. I mean, in any kind of profitable sense, it's barely possible.
There's a giant what's it like? There's an activation cost. Like when you kick your engine over, you have to pump a huge amount of electricity to kick the engine over before the fuel source kicks in and starts running itself. Same kind of thing with the space program. You need a huge push before it becomes profitable or even reasonable.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like even going to the moon. I mean, there's nothing on the moon. You know, there was no actual material benefit to going to the moon. But
we're still not even sure if there's water up there for us to drink to build a colony.
But at the same time, holy shit, we put a man on the moon. There's a certain supernatural benefit to it, practically.
Yeah, a moral benefit. There's a heroic tale to all of that. And you know what? I'm reading. I'm reading. Oh, good lord, Clausewitz right now, his book on war, and he points out that self-reliance is one of the core aspects of the hero, of the soldier. And what is more self-reliant than going to the frickin' moon? You're not getting you can't phone AAA for a boost when you're flying to the damn moon. You have to be 100% self-reliant. You even have to have your own damn oxygen that you're bringing with you.
Yeah. You know, I mean, there's nothing but a relatively thin piece of metal separating you from the cold vacuum of space.
And so self-reliance that is being eroded so much in the modern time. Like obviously you mentioned the welfare state. Here in Canada, we're getting more. The funny thing is that Canada has the larger, well, in theory, if you actually look at GDP and government expenditures, Canada versus the United States, we're about the same. In fact, up until the past couple of years, Canada was more economically free than the United States. So the welfare state is different, but it's roughly proportionate. With America, you have a very distinct and specific large underclass on the welfare system, whereas in Canada, what's developing is this massive corporate welfare system, right? So you get the job at the corporation, and your freedoms are heavily curtailed, but at the same time, you have a free gym, and they have a bunch of showers in the corporate building, and like you're given all these privileges in exchange for your curtailed freedom. So as opposed to the massive underclass that's on welfare in Canada, it's a generalized incorporation of everybody into the welfare system. And both of these are the opposite of self-reliance.
Well, it's more, I would argue it's more destructive to a moral fiber at the personal level, because there's at least a bit of an illusion of self-reliance when you have corporate welfare. When you have this just sort of general, everybody's getting at welfare, but when you have people going on programs, like they know damn well they're being a parasite, and they do it anyways. I mean, that's neither is good long term, but I think there's maybe not a bigger destructive force, but a more immediate destructive force with the personal welfare.
Well, and even the consumerism has turned into a very similar sort of entitlement program, entitlement complex, I should say, where, as you commented, grocery stores are a freaking miracle. When I'm at the grocery store, sometimes I'm just awed by the logistical network in place to have all of this food, all of it very, very fresh as well. It's not like the pasta's been sitting there for 6 months. Maybe it's been there a week at most. Okay, that's all this fresh food, all laid out, huge logistical network. It blows me away. Whereas the Black Friday thing seems to just reek of entitlement. You have all these fat, stupid, fatties lining up to get a plasma screen TV, and they have no idea. They don't have even the beginning of an inkling as to how to make one of those things, let alone how to fix it.
Well, not only that, it's become so far removed. I mean, they're not even doing that to shop for other people at this point. It's become like some poor person's like, this is the best way I can afford a TV is by hanging out in line all day Thanksgiving.
Yeah, or you could just not buy a television.
Yeah, or just buy a smaller one. Maybe you don't need the giant flat screen TV. Maybe you get a smaller TV. Or hell yeah, why do you even need a TV anymore? For fuck's sake, get a laptop and just watch Netflix.
Yeah, you can also apply for jobs with your laptop. You can, there's YouTube, which is completely free for now. There's all of this. But that's people for you. They need their season passes to the sports ball game. I don't know, man. People are weird. But, this said, I was hanging out with a couple of coworkers on Friday night. Young kids, too, about 21. And, I've heard a lot of people talk about this Generation Z or whatever. And by the way, 21, you're still a millennial, technically speaking. But you know what? I was dismissive of all of it. But these kids, man, these kids coming up right now are pretty woke, I gotta say. They were still in there. Like, how you're 21 years old and you're independent for the first time. You're living at your own place, earning your own money, and how any 21-year-old worth their salt becomes an anarchist. Yeah, so there was a little bit of that. There's a little bit, okay, you know what? I'm not going to argue with you on this because I know that you're coming into it from a good place.
Everyone goes through the fuck you dad stage.
And you know what? If fuck you dad is I'm going to earn my own damn money and I'm going to drink when I want and I'm still going to show up to work on time. If that's fuck you dad, it's like, you know what, buddy, you go through that stage and you fuck you dad the hell out of it.
The key words there are go through it. You don't just camp out there and live there for the rest of your days.
No, eventually you get to the point where it's like, wait a minute. I handled myself pretty well, but good Lord, there's a lot of idiots out there. Yeah, I don't know what things are like in the States, but I'll tell you here in Calgary, anytime you hear an ambulance, 50% of the time it's a fentanyl overdose.
Well, I'll tell you what, I had a buddy who did, he was an EMT for a while. And I mean, that was like a dream. He finally got his EMT job and he loved it at first. He's going to be fucking Captain America, save everybody. He's going to be a hero. And 6 months into it, he goes, I feel like all I do is God drags the trash out to the curb and I just drag it back in. Like, not today, natural selection.
I had a buddy that was a cop in LA, and he sent me a PM on the forum where I'd said something about police work. And he responded he wrote me a message saying, you know what, man? The joke here in my department is we call ourselves garbage men because all we do is we go out and we pick up the garbage.
He's probably not wrong. I mean,
which is the same thing that Medic is saying.
Yeah, that's exactly how he put it. He goes, God takes the trash out, and I drag it right back from the curb.
This leads into an article from Anonymous Conservative, and God bless that guy because he is always on point. And so his recent post says the government views the online right as a threat, radical Islam not so much. And he quotes the Times, the UK Times. 9 people a day are being arrested for posting alleged offensive messages online as police step up their campaign to combat social media hate speech. And he goes on, meanwhile in Britain, Britain is open about the fact that 400 jihadis have returned from overseas, and yet they cannot find the resources to even figure out where they went. So 9 people a day are being arrested in the war against trolling, but jihadis, not such an issue. And I mean, it's the same damn issue we're seeing in Canada, isn't it? In Canada, we just had, the Calgary mayoral election. Nenshi played off of the fact that evil racists didn't want him to be mayor. Meanwhile, the Canadian government is giving poor little Omar $10 million. This is another one of those data points that just really supports RK theory. Because how do you explain this? How do you possibly explain that a couple of right-wing trolls hurting people's feelings on Twitter is worthy of government investigation and prosecution, all of that, and yet active jihadis are not a problem?
Oh, RK is just so many things make so much sense in light of RK that it's honestly one of those things I don't understand how it's not more widely spread and accepted.
Yeah, it's funny when you hear the left trying to debate it, saying it's all theoretical or there's no proof of it, or of course you wouldn't see the proof of it because you're absolutely blind. The liberal only understands what it's like to be a liberal. The conservative usually comes to conservatism because they used to be a liberal to some degree.
You'd think you get the hardcore religious guys arguing it, even though, I mean, even within a creationist model, there's still microevolution. But no, you get the leftists who are and it's usually like the most hardcore, won't shut up about evolution fedoras that suddenly that thinks somehow evolution has no aspect, has created no biodiversity among the human species.
Well, again, this is the whole mugging by reality. Like one of the things that the young kids believed, as good little young kids were, they believed completely in all races are identical. And it's like, you know what? I'm not going to argue with the young kids. They were woke on so many other things. All right, but there's one thing they're like, oh no, it's just racism. I'm like, okay. You know what? You'll get mugged by reality. I don't need to, it doesn't freaking matter. You'll figure it out soon enough. But yeah, it's funny. The fedoras, the atheists are absolutely mute on human biodiversity. But it makes sense when you realize that foundationally the majority of atheists are rabbits.
Pretty much.
They're not. Now, there are some atheists who are atheists out of irrational skepticism, but the majority of atheists are just joiners. And skeptical atheism is the fun joining thing where you get to pretend that you're a scientist and that you flew to the moon and that you discovered evolution and that you built computers and all that. You get to pretend that you are part of the grand scientific narrative just because you're beating a dead horse on Twitter.
Yeah, like you're a great scientific mind because you're arguing with a flat Earth idiot on the tumblers.
Oh, good. The obsession they have with the creationists, it just it boggles the mind. Absolutely boggles the mind.
It's like, congratulations, Bill Nye. You managed to kind of sort of win a debate with Ken Ham.
Yeah, exactly. Way to go. That changed the world for the better. But yeah, to go back to this 9 people a day being arrested in Britain for hate speech. You know, folks, this is why. You know, I made the mistake of arguing with a liberal on Twitter earlier today, and like, of course, it went absolutely nowhere. You know, he was saying, "What's wrong with sexualizing this child? What's wrong with taking 12-year-old boy and putting makeup on him? There's nothing wrong with that."
But what if the child consents?
Yeah, exactly. Now, here's the thing. I regret arguing with them because A, I know liberals don't change their mind. B, like, I wasn't going to. Everybody that follows me, they know the information on this. And C, by arguing with him, you know what? I risked saying something hateful. I risked saying something hateful and completely non-productive.
Plus, you know, you're going to get showed off the Twitter there for upsetting a communist.
Yeah, exactly. There's absolutely no reason for me to do. There's nothing productive is done.
As Ben Shapiro once said, and I'm hardly a fan of that little peckerhead, but if you're going to argue with a liberal, only do so for the benefit of an audience.
Exactly. And I think that the number one thing that we can be doing around here is, honest to God, it's self-improvement. Like I was saying, with these young kids, you know, like, I wish that there was, you know, like, complete, it's like the racial inequalities, the human biodiversity is one of those things that's really unfair in life. You know, IQ especially is just one of those really unfair things. If you have a low IQ, there is nothing you can do to become smart. You're never going to become. It sucks, right? So yeah. I can see where these kids are coming from. But like, what's the point of me arguing with them over this, right? Because they're going to figure it out soon enough. Like, if they're woke, if they're open to new information, they will figure it out. There's no reason to put your neck on the line and potentially be labeled a racist, just to prove an autistic point of human biodiversity.
Well, if I ever argue any kind of biodiversity points, I don't even bring up the IQ thing generally. If it's somebody that's never really thought of it, I just bring up the point of, like, look, I mean, I'm not saying people aren't people. I'm not saying there's not some sort of moral intrinsic rights that human beings have, you know, some sort of intrinsic value. You know, I'm a man of faith. I certainly believe that. But, you know, a Rottweiler and a Bulldog and a Chihuahua and a Cocker Spaniel, they're all dogs, but they're not the same.
Yeah, and they're never going to be the same, and they don't need to be the same.
Yeah. You know, different groups of people are going to be different. You know,
well, Pope of Discord brings up the difference between wisdom and IQ.
Yeah, even the IQ aside, they're going to have general different temperaments. I mean, a group of people, for example, that, you know, developed in a tropical climate are not going to have the same temperaments as a group of people that developed in a cold, icy climate, even if you take the IQ part out of the equation.
I mean, hell, just look at us Italians. Hey, we piss off all the white people.
Well, that's because Sicilians were spawned by nignogs. Didn't you see that Quentin Tarantino movie?
Oh, God. Yeah, I mean, isn't this funny? All of the alt-right takes their racial theories from a left-wing Jew in his violent, nihilistic murder porn fantasy film
that he wrote when he wasn't busy sucking Uma Thurman's toes.
Ugh. Oh, God. Yeah, it's oh man, but I guess what my point is like these autistic arguments that some people want to have, whether it's about, you know, like race realism or all, like this is kind of missing the point. All right, the point is developing more K-type people. All right, and when you go out there developing K-type people, you know, there's nothing obviously hate speech about that. That's the beauty of that "it's okay to be white" campaign. There's nothing obviously hate speech. It just begs the question.
Yeah, it's hard. It is the kind of thing that's almost it's in some ways the sort of thing the left used to be really good at and kind of lost the ability. When they call something hate speech or they whatever, where it's like it's hard for you to argue against it without looking like an asshole. So just from a rhetoric standpoint, something like it's okay to be white, how would you possibly argue against that without looking like an asshole? Because in that case, I mean, you are an asshole if you're arguing against it. But yeah, that's brilliant. I don't know who came up with that, but I see like the flyers passed around, and I can't help but wonder what would happen if people would start writing that on different like bits of cash they get, $20 bill or $5 bill. I'm of course not telling people to do that because that's illegal.
It's illegal to deface a currency.
I'm just merely thinking out loud.
Exactly. I just do a lot of thinking out loud. That's what I do. It's funny. Like, that's the thing. Is good trolling is not obvious trolling. Okay, and like, guys, don't get any of yourselves arrested by the British bobbies for pointing out that what Britain is overrun with Islamic terrorists. Don't get yourself arrested for that. There's no profit in it.
Yeah.
I'm feeling pretty optimistic about that. Like, I am. It's funny how frequent the term apocalypse is appearing even in the mainstream media. Okay, here's another article from Anonymous Conservative where he quotes the Daily Mail. So he writes, Daily Mail tells you how to survive the apocalypse. So here's their advice. People should plan on staying in their homes and cities in most scenarios. It is recommended to have enough water and non-perishable food for 3 days, a flashlight, batteries, a first aid kit, and a solar charger for your phone. Finally, Renee recommends having a positive attitude and maintain calm, as becoming anxious can become dangerous when facing obstacles. And Anonymous Conservative also points out, one more thing. Remember, rabbits, firearms are scary things, and one would probably kill you before it killed anyone else. So don't have any guns. Just have one flashlight and a small first aid kit and some bottled water.
Dumbass.
And make sure you stay in the cities. Don't leave the city.
Make sure you don't have any guns so that I, with my gun, can just take your bottled water.
Oh, good Lord. When diversity shows up at the door, they're going to take they'll invite them in and share their water before they get tied up with bleach poured down their throats.
Yeah, you know what? If I stockpile bullets and my neighbors stockpiled bottled water, that just means I have a shed next door with a lot of bottled water.
Oh my God. It's funny. Like, this is, and I don't think they're being disingenuous, by the way, but this, if you want to keep the population sedate, and like if there's an apocalypse and you want to make sure that like you're going all How I Learned to Love the Electric Bomb, and you're building like the future society of the elites, each of which gets 10 21-year-old women. This is what you would tell the population to do. Remain calm, stay at home, don't do anything. This is exactly what they would want. And again, the irony is, I don't think this is disingenuous. This is actually what rabbits think they should do. Okay, if the lights go off, if there's a solar flare and all the lights go off, just sit at home in the cold and the dark with your flashlight, reading your Harry Potter books, and don't worry, the government's going to come save you. And by the way, the government saving you means that they need some good laborers. And so they're going to come put you in chains to labor for them. Or the diversity will show up and eat you. One of the two. But if you have like a t-shirt printing business, you could, like, before they eat, you could give them a t-shirt that says, I eat everything I fuck, and I fuck everything I eat. Oh, but like, it's really, really starting to feel like something's coming down the tubes. And it's going to be interesting. But guys, you keep your powder dry and you keep the cards close to your chest. Yeah, I think most of you will be all right. I'm pretty sure, like, for whatever reason, I've more or less stayed off the radar. You know, aside when I was doing that that film that was doomed from the get-go, I've stayed off the radar for some reason. I think part of it might just be possibly because I use too many big words. But yeah, I'm not talking about some sort of stupid tiki torch rally or march or some big political thing. No, I'm talking about, you know, here's what I'm noticing about the world. Weird place, ain't it?
But what are you doing for the movement?
What are you doing for the movement? We need to have tiki torches and get all of our members arrested. By the way, speaking of observations on what's going on in the world, so I mentioned a couple of weeks ago the situation with the Las Vegas shooter and what's going on in Saudi Arabia. And to briefly recap, Saudi Arabia is going through absolute turmoil because fracking. Saudi Arabia has been running OPEC. They've been a world power just because they have oil, even though they don't have, like, it's this elite class of losers ruling over slaves that actually do everything. There's no system, there's no society, it's just oil. But fracking undermined that. And so the current king of Saudi Arabia has decided that he's going to become buddy-buddy with Trump, since they're not going to stop fracking as much as they tried, and he's going to industrialize Saudi Arabia. And in exchange, you know, Trump's going to help them as long as they stop, you know, having slaves and treating women like shit. So a lot of Saudis didn't like this, and they were planning to take out the crown prince when he was at the Mandalay Bay. And on the evening, by the way, of the shooting in Vegas, there is footage of the Las Vegas Police Department escorting the crown prince away from the poker table at Tropicana, where he was. And so the operative theory is that the shooting, Paddock was actually just an arms dealer working for the CIA or FBI, one of the alphabet agencies. And when they realized that all of the assassins were being rounded up, they said, okay, let's try and make this look like a mass shooting. And so they shot Paddock and then started putting rounds downrange into the audience. And eventually the cops showed up and they both killed themselves before the cops took the room. And then the police quite conveniently posted that one picture of Paddock on 4chan to distract us from the fact that he'd been dead long before the shooting started. So that theory makes a lot of sense to me. And so, yeah, the people that were trying to take out the Saudi king failed. And right now there are a lot of people being rounded up in Saudi Arabia. And apparently, from what I've been hearing, Americans are involved in all of this. There are American assets over with boots on the ground in Saudi Arabia helping capture these guys and helping interrogate them in an enhanced manner before they put them down like the dogs they are.
That's rather interesting.
So while there might never be official justice for what happened in Las Vegas, the people behind it are being waterboarded. They are, oh, good Lord, they are not meeting pleasant ends. They are getting what's coming to them at American hands. So there's a little bit of comfort. And the funny thing is, most people are just so absolutely asleep that they're completely unaware of what's going on. And, you know, like, listen, this brings up the whole question of, like, torture and what. Torture should not be used to get competitive. It doesn't work. And I tend to lean more towards just, you know, kill the person for the sake of justice. But at the same time, you know, if we know somebody is guilty, if we, like, we haven't proved in the court, like, yeah, but we know they're guilty. We know they're guilty. I don't care. Torture them. 50 Americans are dead because of you scumbags and your absolute disrespect for human life. Yeah, enjoy the waterboarding. It's only going to get worse after we put a bullet through your head.
Well, I mean, with a lot of the true believer Muslims, almost the only way to fight them is to do some sort of psychological thing. I mean, you know, I don't know, can you coat a bullet in dog piss or bacon grease and still have it fire right? I'm not sure. I'm
Honestly,
not
they
an
should be,
expert on guns. I don't know if that would mess up the gun, but
they really should be doing that. Louise Frampton says death penalty is the best social justice.
social justice. If social justice was justice, they just call it justice.
Yeah.
Beware anyone who wants to put a word in front of justice.
Yeah, it's so funny to think that time and again, I've noticed that like we in this little corner of the internet, we're roughly about a year to 3 years ahead of the times. Aaron Clarey wrote Worthless. And a few years later, the media starts finally talking about an education bubble. Not to the same extent. They won't admit that most of the degrees are useless, but they're talking about this massive bubble where people can't afford their student loans. There's the whole aspect of Bernie being strong-armed out of the DNC. We knew that a year ago, and the rest of the world is only figuring it out now. Same thing goes for anti-Pope Bergoglio. At least with us Catholics, most of us have been aware of the fact that the whole thing was fishy as all hell from the get-go. And now it looks like the wider Christendom is starting to figure out that Bergoglio is not, in fact, the Pope. And, I wonder if in a year's time, this whole Las Vegas thing will come out and people will realize that it was Saudis trying to make it look like a mass shooter.
Well, that's a different thing because Alex Jones once said that the hardest thing he has to deal with when he's presenting any kind of evidence for this or that conspiracy theory is the inherent fact that people don't want to believe conspiracy theories. I mean, aside from the guys that are really all gung-ho about it and can see a conspiracy in a ham sandwich, most people don't want to hear anything about a conspiracy theory. It's scary. It's, whatever. So I don't know. I don't know on that. Most people aren't going to want to dig deep. I mean, it's Trump released the CIA papers on the Kennedy assassination. We know now for a fact that the CIA had Kennedy killed. And have you seen that on TV anywhere? Have you even heard Rush Limbaugh? Or hell, I don't even think Michael Savage touched it.
Yep. Same thing with the 9/11. He released the 30 missing pages from the 9/11 Commission. The Saudis were behind it and knew it was happening, which is a real big shock since, Osama bin Laden was a Saudi prince. Which again, like what I read, it kind of confirmed my suspicions. That yes, it was a conspiracy, but and you know what? This is the problem with conspiracies. Is on the one hand, you're right; they are very, very frightening. When you realize, like for instance, Google, even if you turn off location tracking on your Android, apparently they were still tracking you, and that's really creepy. It's really creepy to think about all the information, all the data they're gathering on you. And that's just one of them. It's really creepy to think that there are these liars and these sneaks running around behind the scenes doing all this stuff. Very frightening. But at the same time, like the other side, like the conspiracy nut, for them, it all boils down to some sort of Illuminati. And there's a comfort in that. The idea that there is an Illuminati in charge, that there is a grand conspiracy, and that they can fight against that conspiracy, there's a comfort in that. When the kind of middle ground of conspiracy theory that we're talking about right here is simply the mundane fact that by the time God crapped out the third caveman, a conspiracy was launched against one of them.
Well, it's sort of also that like if you ever seen the movie Cube, it's that scary idea that maybe the beast has no head.
Exactly.
Because I mean, in theory, if all the ills of the world are the result of Doctor Doom and Lex Luthor sitting in a smoke-filled room, then at least in theory, you can find that smoke-filled room and shoot them. But
yeah, whereas like the answer to the Las Vegas shooting, it was an attempted assassination of the crown prince over something that most Americans have no idea what the politics of Saudi Arabia are. And somehow this exploded into 50 people at a country music festival dying for no reason whatsoever. That's not satisfying. That's not preventable.
Well, that's why so many people, I mean, part of the push for gun control is obviously, you know, there's a lot of politicians who would like to do things to us for which they should be rightfully shot. But part of it is also after one of these shootings that people want to feel like they can do something. And if the guy who did it is already dead, you know, then there's no catharsis in stringing up a dead body. So, you know, they want, and on the right, you get a lot of social conservatives that, especially years ago, want to complain, oh, the violent video games made them do it, dumb shit like that. Because nobody just wants to accept the fact that, you know, in a lot of these cases, somebody went fucking nuts and they're dead now, and there's nothing we can do about it.
You know what? For sake of argument, I'm going to translate this into an attack on the conservative class. They really drive me nuts. But for sake of argument, in fact, I even like the weak form of the video games cause violence argument. You know, if you take young children and expose them to extremely violent movies and extremely violent video games, that is going to affect their perception of reality. I don't think that's a bold statement for me to make. That the media you surround yourself with is going to affect your perception of the world. And if you grow up in a world where you always see people shooting one another and etc., you're going to assume that the world's a violent place. Ironically, you're probably going to become a liberal because of that. So, but even if we accepted the notion that video games can cause violence, like the real question is, it's not just video games. Books are violent. Movies are violent. You know, poems are violent. Why is it like? And this is what the conservative that wants to blame video games. They don't answer this question. Why is it happening now that people are flipping out and becoming mass shooters? Why didn't it happen 50 years ago?
Well, also, I mean, why do the conservatives, you know, want to say that violent video games did this, but violent movies didn't, violent literature didn't, whatever? And you could make the argument that maybe there's something more potent about the interactive nature of it. But simply put, I think the reason they want to focus on the video games and, you know, none of the other media it was a problem in their eyes is because to these boomer ass fucking conservatives, video games are this new and scary thing that they don't understand and they shake their fist at it.
Exactly. They don't want to understand it. They don't want to investigate it. Because there's the corollary question. If the violent music and violent video games are causing this violent behavior, well, what caused the market for violent video games and violent music? Like we know that there was never a song about a guy called Mac the Knife that murdered people with his switchblade. Back in the day, we know there was no violent media back in the 40s. Okay, so why is there suddenly a market for all of this? What the hell is going on? That A, there's a market, B, there's kids that are susceptible to it, C, what the hell is going on? And they just want to point to the proximate cause and not the ultimate cause.
And well, like I said, a part of that with boomers is, and I don't entirely understand it, but they hate video. I don't know. Maybe that was like that in the past. Maybe when movies first came out, old people at the time thought that it was the devil or something. I don't know. But man, do boomers hate video games with a deep psychotic passion. I mean, a boomer will look down on a millennial for playing a video game for an hour when they just got done watching 14 hours of television.
Yeah, exactly.
You wasted your time. Excuse me, I'm going to go watch Fox News for 6 hours.
Yeah, you should have been sitting around smoking weed and listening to the Beatles like me. Here's another funny little thing.
A perfect example is I was at a friend from church's house, a boomer guy, and I had my little Game Boy Advance SP out, and I'm kind of playing it a little bit. It was like a big, picnic, and I kind of got there early, sort of thing, big cookout kind of thing. And he's just looking over and he's like, "Why are these all so violent? It's all about shooting something or killing something." And I just kind of looked up at him. I'm like, "Don't you hunt for sport?" And he's like, "That's different." I'm like, "Yeah, it is different. It is different because those are actual living things. These are ones and zeros." I think I'm kind of on the high ground here when it comes to the question of violence.
Speaking of the whole conservative phenomenon, this is an observation that I have. It doesn't really go anywhere, so I can't make a video about it, But here's the observation. So the whole GLBT started out, like 20 or 30 years ago, their catchphrase became "born this way," right? And they started looking for all of this scientific, with massive fucking air quotes. They're looking for all this scientific evidence to support that there's a genetic component or whatever, that people are just naturally born gay. Which, by the way, goes against everything that we understand about genetics. You're born with predispositions, or even male pattern baldness is not guaranteed by genes, and that's heavily genetically influenced.
If it was entirely genetic, that sort of seems like the kind of genetic trait, the very kind of genetic trait natural selection would weed out for obvious reasons.
But they did such a good job propagandizing the idea that you're born gay and you can't help it. Apparently you can't help going to the bathhouse and sleeping with 100 people. You just can't help that. That now conservatives believe it. And what I've started noticing coming out of the liberal media is now the liberals are embracing that we can teach kids to become queer. And this is just, it's brilliant in its evilness, that you have all of these conservatives refusing, like they're demanding the freedom of dildo cakes because people are born that way and it's their freedom to have a dildo cake. Meanwhile, the liberals are actively working at turning more kids into faggots. And the conservatives are completely hamstrung because they believe you're born that way. So that 12-year-old kid I mentioned, that they're putting makeup on him and getting him to dance around like a fairy, well, he was just born that way. It's not child abuse. He's not being groomed by homosexual pedophiles. No, he's born that way and he consents. And it's just absolutely amazing to see these conservatives fall for this shit. I'm only 36, okay, and I've watched this Hegelian dialectic play out about a dozen times. Yeah, I fell for it the first few times, granted, but I eventually wisened up.
Well, I mean, I've often said with that, born this way thing, I don't know entirely what causes homosexuality. I think it's more nurture than it is nature, although nature probably plays a role. But at the same time, if you prove to me it was 100% nature, I'd be like, I don't care. There are some people who are just born with more of an inclination to be violent.
Oh, like me, for instance.
And it doesn't mean they can just go around punching motherfuckers in the face.
My sister's
even if it's Richard Spencer. Even if it's Richard Spencer, not even him.
I don't think Richard Spencer was born with an innate disposition to getting into fist fights.
No, I mean,
except for the ones where he loses.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, even if you have the urge to punch people in the face, you can't be doing that. Not even Richard. Not even to him.
Exactly. I'm a very hot-tempered Italian. Part of the reason I don't get angry very easily is because I can't let myself get angry very easily. Because I know how to hurt people, and I can't be going out and doing that because there's a lot of people that I want to string up.
Well, that's just an essential teaching in Christianity, that we all have a flawed nature to, a deeply flawed aspect to our nature in some way, and that doesn't mean you can just go ahead and indulge in that.
Yeah, and the really sad thing about the homosexuality is how it's It's become so sacrosanct that you can't even criticize what they get up to. You know, it's like the conservatives all want to believe that the cucks all want to believe that we have this world where they just like they're just same-sex attraction. They just want to get gay married together. It's like that's not what. There's a I'm sure there's a subset. There's always the principled exception.
Yeah, there's
right?
7 billion people on the planet. There's always going to be exceptions.
I'm sure you can find a few. Actually, you know what, Milo. I don't know everything about Milo's life, but the way he's presented it, he's roughly as bad as your average Gen X couple. Okay, where he fooled around a lot, and now he's gay married, and I'm sure they only bring a new partner over once every other month. Okay, that's not the typical story. Okay, the typical story is extreme hedonism, extreme drug abuse, extreme obsession with your looks, with your social standing, with all like the whole thing. Even if there's nothing wrong with homosexuality, the homosexual scene is absolute poison. It destroys human souls.
Yeah, I mean, you'd look down on a heterosexual who's, banging rando people every fucking night and doing it in public and walking around on a leash and shit in public. I mean, you'd look down on a heterosexual doing that.
Listen, the worst I've seen is my buddy Chad. And this is a real guy.
Chad.
And, oh god, he is such a fucking Chad. He is disgustingly Chad.
Is it the Virgin Davis versus the Chad?
No. This is the dissolute hedonist Davis saying, "Geez, buddy, you really need to rein it in." And this guy, and he gets up to way too much. Yeah, he just got caught cheating on his girlfriend, and now he has 30 women that want to sleep with him because of it. Okay, he's that guy. And I say, like, man, you need to calm this down a little bit. I think you're a little bit out of control here. You can't keep being the Mr. Cool, good-looking guy for the rest of your fucking life. You know, you're old enough to get over this. But even he's not doing it in public. He's not walking around wearing a collar or walking around naked women. Like, he could, probably, but he's not doing that, okay? Like, he is probably the epitome of what a heterosexual guy can get up to, and it's nothing compared to your average homosexual.
Oh, I'm sure it's just much easier for them to get laid too, inherently.
Yeah, it's called going to the bathhouse. And so that's the thing. We can't and this really breaks my heart because there are souls and lives being destroyed by all of this. Okay, like the rampant spread of HIV was easily preventable. But instead of doing anything about HIV in the gay community, which is where it resides, we propagandized all of the high school kids in Generation X that anybody can get HIV.
That's the favorite lie of the liberals, something that is technically true. It's technically true. You can get HIV just from having penis and vagina sex one time.
You can get HIV from licking a toilet seat. But yeah, and that's so that there's nothing being done to address that. Yeah, it's like the transsexualism thing. You know, like ultimately, yeah, I'm whatever. I'm libertarian in my views, just because trying to run my own life is already more than I can do on my own. All right, trying to run other people's lives, I don't have the time for that. But what we're seeing, this huge push for transgenderism right now, it's ruining lives. You're going to see a lot more of this, by the way. There's already cases coming out here and there of people that thought they were transsexuals and did hormones for a while and then got off the hormones. And it's being mentioned in a very blasé manner. But those hormones do damage to your body. You know, like look at bodybuilders, okay? Being a bodybuilder, taking steroids in an appropriate and healthy manner is actually quite difficult. You need to really know what you're doing to become a bodybuilder. And there's a lot of bodybuilders that have screwed themselves up because they haven't done it correctly. And so now we have a whole generation that during their awkward teenage phase is experimenting with transsexualism. Again, like if this is what you want to do to your body, I'm not going to tell you that you can't. You know, like you want to get a whole bunch of tattoos all over you. You want to, whatever. Like it's your body, it's your business, man. I don't really care. But right now we have a whole industry that's preying upon these people. And in about, probably about 20 years, we're going to start seeing the fallout. We're going to start seeing 45-year-old women developing osteoporosis because they messed with their hormones. Or, God forbid, they got a hysterectomy. Did you know that's a thing with the female-to-male transsexual?
What, getting a hysterectomy?
Mm-hmm. Because they don't want to bleed every month. It reminds them that they're a woman. And by the way, getting a hysterectomy takes about 15 years off a woman's life. It's the equivalent of being castrated as a man. Okay, like you, listen, if you get prostate surgery when you're 60, you know, well, guess what? You better learn how to eat box because you aren't going to be fucking your wife no more. But like whatever, you're 60. Whereas if you castrate a man at a young age, it actually really messes with their lives. They're prone to obesity. They're prone to all sorts of health problems, etc. And the hysterectomy is the modern castration. And so we're taking these young kids and we are like your sexual organs are not just for sex. They're actually a critical component of your body. Your body needs the damn things to be healthy. And we're lopping them off because of a short-term whatever. And again, like, hey, if you really want to do that, I'm not going to stop you. But we're not talking about a 35-year-old whatever that's doing this. We're talking about a 14-year-old that doesn't know anything.
Yes, the idea somebody's not old enough to consent to buy a cigarette or drink or have a beer or any of this other stuff, but you know, they can consent to having their dick cut off.
And yet we won't cut off the limbs of. There's another mental illness where people feel like one of their limbs or one of their body parts is a foreign entity, right? Where their like left arm is not their left arm, and they want to get their left arm cut off. We won't do that.
Yeah, but really, why the hell not? I mean, I have yet to have anybody explain to me why, you know, that's no good, but we can cut somebody's dick off.
And you know, that's what drives me nuts about all of this is that like there's a human toll to all of it. And because I might hurt somebody's feelings, I'm not supposed to talk about the massive, like, listen, dude, if you want to get a fucking tattoo on your arm and you hear me at the bar saying tattoo, only faggots get tattoos, guess what? Suck it up, buttercup. People are going to have opinions.
Well, that's the other thing. I mean, and it's from the entire gay community, this constant need for validation. I mean, like Davis, you obviously enjoy drinking and smoking. Do you feel like the whole world has to throw you a fucking parade for that, or you feel bad about it?
No, not really. I consider it's my habit, my problem.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's one thing, you know, the quote unquote gay rights movement. It's one thing to be like trying to fight against sodomy laws or whatever, just, you know, to fight for quote unquote the right to be left alone. It's an But when you're demanding that all of society has to proverbially suck your dick or you'll go kill yourself because you feel bad, well, then maybe you got bigger problems than, you know, maybe you just actually feel bad about it.
Do you know what I really liked about those young kids I was hanging out with? Their desire to be challenged. Like they were asking me, okay, here's what I think about this. What do you think? What's your argument? Like they wanted me to argue with them, which is really unfair because it's like, dude, I've got 15 years of experience arguing on you. Okay, I'm so much better than you at this, so I'm not going to argue. That's not fair. But I'm gonna just toss some zingers your way. I'm gonna just toss a few ideas at you that kind of fuck with you, and you're gonna have to think about. But they wanted the argument. They wanted the challenge. Versus the narcissist, this narcissistic culture we're developing, where everybody wants the affirmation. I think that's the core of it right there. Whether we're talking about people destroying their sexual organs, or people painting their hair blue, or getting tattoos, or whatever it might be, this constant demand of affirmation that everybody needs to love and endorse and respect and celebrate my stupid decision.
And again, it comes from the fact that, I mean, you know, they're trying to silence a little voice in their head that's telling them they shouldn't be doing this. So they need the constant affirmation. They need everybody to be constantly saying, no, it's okay.
Yeah, they want... I mean, it's... The only way to be cool is to not try and be cool. Like, everybody wants to be cool and confident. Okay, but you need to earn being cool and confident. I'll give you a little example. So I was meeting my buddy at Starbucks. And of course, all these Starbucks, because they're the company's owned by a faggot, they have all these stickers on the tables outside that say no smoking. And I don't give a shit about those stickers because fuck those stickers, they're gay. So I'm sitting out there with Space Dog, and I'm smoking my cigarette and drinking my coffee. And there's this woman hanging out by the entranceway. She's kind of like marching back and forth. And after a few minutes, she works up the minerals. And she says, "Did you see the non-smoking sticker there?" I just look at her. "Yep." And then I just look at her. She's like, "So you just don't give a fuck?" "Nope." And she wandered the fuck off. That's what I think about people that have a problem with me smoking. Okay, like, I know I don't give a fuck. Go fly a fucking kite. And all of these, you need to respect my identity. See, she respected my identity because I told her to go fly a fucking kite. And by the way, we just got Dual Carnean has joined the call for the casual Sunday night shit post. How are you doing, brother?
Oh, Great Scale Clad wanted to know if he could hop in too.
Yeah, toss him the link.
All right.
Yeah, I'm doing well.
We're just talking about how it's everybody. Like, listen, if you want to be important, you need to earn yourself being important. Okay, if you want to be a badass, you need to go study karate. You know, the Dane Cook of the martial arts. Whatever, I don't care. I studied enough Goju Ryu, I can kick the ass in 99% of the population. So that, okay, yeah, there's like 1% that's tougher than me. Whatever, who gives a fuck? Let's fight about it, you know? Like, you need to earn being cool. You need to earn you need to be comfortable in your identity, not anybody else.
I think what ended up happening is that at some point people started interpreting the idea of classical liberalism and human dignity as being not so much a potential that somebody can have, but rather something that's just there purely out of that person's consciousness or humanity or whatever.
See, I tend to take, when I'm being all like Mr. I have a perfect historical narrative, which I don't really, but you need to pretend like you do. Yeah, I tend to argue pretty hardly against classical liberalism. So like the devil was the first Whig, and classical liberalism is, the core of it's a rebellion against against the king, but by virtue of rebelling against the king, you're also rebelling against the concept of authority in general. But that said, you know what? I'm pretty sure I would get along quite well with most of the founders of the United States, where they
I was
weren't.
more thinking about Burke rather than about Locke.
Go on.
John Burke was a classical liberal, but he had a different idea where he saw it as being somehow traditional, where he saw it as being a specific thing of Anglo culture that they needed to preserve, and that he was just conserving it against kings who were wanting to go against their traditions.
See, well, when you dig into Anglo culture, honestly, this is the big problem with Anglo culture, is that we've been having a religious war for 500 years. And sometimes it goes hot, sometimes it goes cold, but there's always this religious tension, all of which completely misses the point of religion, which is to point you towards the Most High. And so I think that the classical liberalism was an attempt at creating an armistice where it's like, okay, how about we stop killing one another? We stop killing Christians of a slightly different denomination, which is a good place to come from, but at the same time opens up. It's sort of like Vatican II. Vatican II was not heretical, but it opened up the doors to heresy entering the church. And now the Catholic Church is actually more rampantly heretical than about half the Protestant churches out there. So we got Grayscale Plaid. You got some thoughts?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear, brother.
Okay, thank you. One of the things I want to pop. Can you still hear me? I just got an error message.
You're
Yes.
fine.
Okay. One of the things that I want to mention, just popping the stack back to the gay culture thing for a moment. I think it's largely a result of wanting to have their cake and eat it too. Because as I was saying in the chat, gay culture is to culture what zoology is to Australia. Basically, it grew up, so to speak, in isolation. So it developed all these weird, fucked up habits because even notwithstanding the obviously broken nature of the people involved, there's it developed in isolation. It was something you had to do on the down low. It wasn't part of your normal life. So then of course the doors get open and all the and the sunlight comes streaming in on, a lot of pretty fucked up shit. And instead of getting the hammer dropped on it like it should normally have done, you instead get San Francisco.
Yeah, because I think when the doors got opened, everything had to be accepted.
Exactly.
Not just same-sex attraction, but everything that went along with same-sex attraction needed to be accepted and celebrated.
And this is how you get Kevin Spacey, because if you say bad things about that, well, you're a homophobe and you need to not have a job anymore.
I think that one thing that you are missing is that gay culture is basically the first generation of a culture constantly, because of the fact that you don't get born into it. People just join it.
You get recruited.
Yeah, you get recruited.
Well, you get recruited or you gravitate towards it naturally. But I see what you're saying. It's not gay. It doesn't represent the culture as a whole. It's only the only people in it are the people who actively join it.
Here's an example of this. Is 20 years ago, everybody that came out of the closet as gay would immediately start speaking with a gay lisp. Okay, this was not a, like, maybe there's some, I'm sure there's some aspect of homosexuality that causes one to be a little bit lispy, but the gay lisp was such an obvious, exaggerated affectation.
It was a uniform to put on.
Precisely. And every single one of them, when they came out of the closet, would put on this uniform. And so they're not merely same-sex attracted. They're also in favor of drag shows. They're also in favor of, I think like back then, the gay drug of choice was ecstasy. These days it's methamphetamine. But like you're jumping onto this whole bandwagon. All of a sudden, they are listening to Madonna. On and on and on. And it's a very arbitrary sort of culture. It's even more arbitrary, I'd say, than the indie music scene, or the like when you look at the music scene, like you look at goth music, there's all these things that go along with goth music: leather trench coats and eyeliner and mesh shirts, etc. But goth music still exists as part of a historical process of music.
And you
right?
could listen to goth music without being in that culture.
Well, you can listen to Madonna without being gay. Oh, not so much Lady Gaga, but Madonna.
Well, I also wonder, I mean, with being gay, how much of it is like, if you come out of the closet as gay, then everybody just kind of sees you as gay from that point on. And that just, if it's like a feedback loop where that just sort of becomes a defining feature of you, whether you want it to or not.
Well, I don't know. Do I lisp? I slur a bit, but...
Well, I just figured you were drunk all the time.
Well, there's that too, but... well, there's also a thing where the highly visible aspects get the most attention, especially from people who aren't directly involved with it. Everyone knows about San Francisco because of all the fucked up shit they very publicly do there.
Well, and they constantly advertise it as well.
Exactly. I mean, if people are, how is it you like to phrase it, Bechtloff? If it's just friend George butt fucking down the street, the only people who know about that are on the street.
Yeah,
the other
if
people,
that, you know.
Yeah, so it's.
And that's the point, you know. I mean, that's part of why I've moved further away, further right on the position. Is it's like, you know, somebody comes to me and says, I don't want the government in my bedroom. I'm like, well, fair enough. I don't want it in mine either. So yeah,
I don't want your bedroom on Main Street.
Yeah, when your bedroom's on Main Street, you know, I mean, you're sort of making it my business there, you know.
Yeah, that's a fair deal.
I don't particularly want the government going door to door checking people's assholes for cum, but at the rate the gay community is pushing it, that might need to be implemented.
It's going to be anything that's not expressly forbidden is mandatory.
Well, you know, that's the other aspect of it. Like, you know, gay marriage a few years ago, I was like, who cares? Just let them have it, and can we audit the Fed? But I didn't quite realize that I was going to have to bake them a dildo cake or go to jail.
I've noticed that it's so often that they say that the government not being in our bedrooms, or that people are born that way, as just a way of ignoring even debating whether the state itself is a positive or a negative thing, independent of the government.
Or there's this weird connection where, because I have the imaginary liberal over here, Carl the Cuck, is saying, you're criticizing gay marriage, so you want the government investigating bedrooms? Like, no, I don't. I'm trying to say that homosexuality, it doesn't tend to end in a good place. Probably not good for, like, hey, like, you do you, man. But it's like there's a lot of risks associated with that lifestyle, right? You might want to consider those risks before you go and engage in it. Doesn't mean I want the government involved. Where did we get to this point where every opinion that is said, all of a sudden we need the government involved in things?
I figure that it just comes down to that liberals want the government doing everything anyways, so they just think that conservatives think the exact same way.
Also, seems to be a whole spate of people who just can't manage their own lives anymore. Welfare, I blame part of it for that, but as things get more and more complicated and technology and events move faster and faster, people, I think, feel an increasing sense of helplessness about the world, and they just want Big Brother to, tuck them in at night.
I think part of this comes down to the decline of the church, because when the church declined, that makes it so that now
Oh my
the
God.
only major institution that affects people's behavior is the government.
So here's something interesting. Not to change topics, but somebody just messaged me this Cynic in Chief. It was mentioned on Medicare's stream earlier tonight. They were talking about all the Elsa Gate shit on YouTube. I would invite everybody, all you playing at home, why don't you go ahead and do this too? Go ahead and type in your YouTube search bar, how to have.
I saw Medicare's stream, so no spoilers.
Yeah, go ahead, everybody.
For crying out loud.
Holy shit, dude. So
For those of you who are listening down the road, how to HAV and how to have S'(X) kids.
Yes, how to have sex with the E changed to a little asterisk with your kids.
Oh,
is
and
the first result I'm getting.
And the 6th result is how to have S'(X) with your kids.
I wonder if someone Google bombed this at some point.
But you know what? Google is too busy making sure that nobody hears positive things about Trump, and also monitoring their own employees' political opinions. Yeah, this reminds me of when years back I read this anonymous post by a guy. Like, he was one of the guys at Facebook that when you flagged something, he was the guy that got to look at it. And it was this post saying, I am really sick of these SJWs flagging shit they don't agree with. Because once a girl wrote a post saying that my stepdad is molesting me, and it took me 4 hours before I saw that post because of all of you faggots whining about hate speech.
Oh, when I was on Twitter, I accidentally clicked. Somebody was all like, "Holy crap! This account is posting child porn," and I dealt with so much shit of like people whining about nonsense. I'm like, "No, it isn't," and I clicked on it. I was like, "Holy shit, it is!" And like I had to quickly report that to Twitter. So if anyone dug up my fucking internet history, it's like, no, see, I reported it. Leave me alone.
And then you turned off all the lights and hid underneath of a rug.
Yeah, really. I threw that computer into a vat of acid, and then had the melted remains shot into the sun.
Do an exorcism on it.
I think that a lot of people just don't realize that governments are human institutions anymore, or that Facebook's a human institution. They see it as being almost analogous to prayer when they report things.
It's worse than prayer. Prayer, because prayer, everyone who's ever tried it knows it's pretty hit and miss. I think they see it as more of an algorithm. It's a magic box that you type something into and you get the results you want out of it.
There's a short story by Ian Banks I read once.
Oh,
There's
God.
this really eclectic, weird science fiction reality where everybody lived on a giant suspension bridge, which was never explained. They just did. And then people on the other part of the suspension bridge started flying propeller airplanes by their part of the suspension bridge. And so the conversation the next day is like, well, something needs to be done about this. Something needs to be, they can't just fly their propeller airplane. Something needs to be done about this. And it's like, yeah, well, let's get the government involved. Something needs to be done about this.
What was the line in The Simpsons when Marge became an activist? It was an early episode where at the end she was all like, maybe most people can make a difference, but maybe most of the time they probably shouldn't.
Aurini, can you please give the name of that story?
Oh, good lord! It's one of listen. There's Ian Banks has 2 series of books he writes. He has the science fiction culture ones where I think it's Ian M. Banks is his name, and then he has his like weird metafiction, which is just Ian Banks, or it's the other way around.
Ian M. Banks is the culture.
Yeah, he's a very nihilistic writer, but I very much enjoy his writing nonetheless. So yeah, you're not going to hurt too much. Like it's really dark. It's not inspirational. You know, like one of his short stories, it like follows 2 or 3 stories, and it alternates chapter to chapter. And one of them involves a character after getting completely cucked by his girlfriend, who was talking to him while getting railed by some dude, finding like a pornographic magazine and reflecting on the fact that 70% of the weight is wax. It's really depressing stuff. But, you know, if you like depressing stuff, it's good. It's well worth reading. Meanwhile, in the other story, 2 people have been trapped in a medieval castle until they complete a game for so long that a stained glass window has pooled out all over the floor. They realize I've been here for like 10 fucking million years and I can't escape. It's dark, depressing stuff.
Is the story called The Bridge?
It might be. It was a long time ago. I read it 10 years ago.
Well, there's only so much AI autism I can take, and when I need more of that, I just log onto Nickline's Twitter account.
And let's see, we're gonna have a couple more guys jump on here. It's a Sunday night stream. Anything could happen.
All right, you want me to hop off, or should I, or can I hang out?
Yeah, hang out, man. See if you got anything to say.
Okay.
As long as it's good. You know what? Was it the Wasp Factory? Yeah, my only complaint with Ian M. Banks is that his writing is very, he doesn't describe things very well, or at least not for me. I tend to, if you've, I know I only have 1 book, but if you've read it, I describe things at great length. I'm very, very specific with the environment, what it looks like, and Ian, God rest his soul, I think he died recently. He hasn't described things as much as I might like, but his characters are very, very interesting.
Well, I think he's one of those authors. Like, was it Dick or Heinlein who said you shouldn't describe things for a lot. You should just throw in little details and let the reader's imagination fill in the blanks, like the door dilated open.
I'm guessing that was Heinlein, because it sounds like Heinlein.
I think it was Heinlein. With me, I don't know. I guess one of the blessings I have is I have a very good mind for 3D things. The graphics card in my brain is very effective. It's why I'm really good at things like automotives and construction and shooting. It click and like navigation. I'm really good at that stuff because I model things very well. So with my writing, like when I'm imagining an action scene, I'm actually thinking through all of the dynamics of everything in that action scene, and I'm trying to explain it so that I can, to the reader, I want to make sure they have an accurate representation of the environment in their head, and I use that to encourage the drama. At least that's what I hope.
Well, I'd have to read it because I know that Robert Jordan had this problem. When you get into over describing, readers get hung up on the details as opposed to actually feeling the flow of the scene. So
I've always felt like I had that problem, but I think that you'd make a very good screenwriter.
Maybe. I don't know. The whole movies are really weird. Honestly, it blows me away that movies even get made. Like good movies get made.
Just logistics, or
plus you'd have to suck a lot of dick to do it.
Well, there's that,
yeah.
But
Yeah, you said in the becoming a screenwriter that you should not be trying to go into Hollywood?
No, I think Hollywood. I think that recent events have very much backed me up on this. Hollywood's going down. Hollywood is very much crashing.
Well, it's extremely inbred. So the way you get a job is by knowing someone who already has the job, not by being any good.
And sucking dick.
That
Yeah,
too.
exactly. And that's
Fortunately,
the thing.
it's short little Jewish dick, so you won't gag.
If you work in Hollywood, you're going to be working with a bunch of people that work for unions and a bunch of dick suckers. And again, like Bechtloff, no offense, like I really hate the Marvel movies because they are peak Hollywood. They are so well put together and they're so polished and the special effects are so good. Like I can't even tell what's a special effect and what's a costume. Okay, they're absolutely amazing, and the story, but it's so processed.
That's
like
okay. You're allowed to be wrong.
The story just hits all those emotional high points without doing anything weird or daring or creative or anything.
Honestly,
It
they're
really
the only thing coming out of Hollywood I can almost stand anymore. I think
they're cannibalizing off of the good work that Marvel comic books did.
Yeah, and it's not even something Hollywood's coming up with. So I mean, yeah, I've seen 2 movies in the past year's time that were not some sort of comic book movie. One, I saw an animated movie, Leap, because someone I was going to the movies with wanted to see it, and I saw Passengers back in December. I liked both of them, but other than that, I couldn't name a movie I've seen.
Did you see Dunkirk?
I did not. I meant to, but I was kind of busy at the time. I didn't get around to it. I wanted to see Dunkirk though.
See that movie? It's like Saving Private Ryan without all the shit parts.
It was a very good movie.
Yeah, I meant to see Dunkirk.
Aurini, do you remember the part of 1984 where there were machines writing novels?
No, was that in the book?
I'm pretty sure that was in the book. There were machines.
Oh wait, yeah, I remember the like they had algorithmic pop music.
Yeah, and that's, I would say, basically where our pop culture is going.
You know what? That's exactly it. It's more obvious with the music industry than with movies, but music these days, like it's so damn algorithmic. Like the most popular new music is the exact same song again and again and again.
The future is auto-tuned Vocaloids forever.
Pretty much. And like, listen, everything good from the Marvel movies was sucked out of the comic books, and everything else is just this plastic sheen of Hollywood. Which, on the one hand, you know, there might be a little bit of envy in me for this because I could never make something like the Avengers, or is so well polished, you know, and so well organized. Like what an undertaking to make something like the Avengers. But it's such like a well polished. It's not a well polished turd, but it's a well polished something somebody else made.
It's a well polished plastic statuette.
Exactly.
I think you're giving a short shrift to the process of adaptation itself, because as Bechtloff can tell you, there's 40 50 years of Marvel continuity. There's these giant tangled plot threads, and taking all that and sorting through it.
There's something impressive in the Marvel movies where I think they're able to get to the essence of something.
You know what?
They're able to tell decades worth of stories, sometimes in 90 minutes. So I do consider that impressive.
I think part of the reason I hate the Marvel movies so much is because I like them.
Even Ant-Man?
I haven't seen it, but
Ant-Man's pretty good. I don't know why everybody crapped on Ant-Man.
How about Doctor Strange?
Doctor Strange is one of their better ones.
I've been wanting to see that just because I really love the special effects, the whole twisty reality stuff. But like, what bothers me is I like it, and I'm aware that I'm being manipulated. It's like going to the strip club And it's like going to that one strip club in Vegas where they don't have to wear panties, so the girls do nothing but walk up and down the stage on their knees with their like butt cheeks completely spread. I like it, and I know I'm being manipulated. Yeah, that's what the Marvel movies are to me. I really like them. They look amazing. The plot points hit all like the major plot. There's this great Marvel story behind it, and I know I'm being manipulated, and I don't like it. They are too perfect.
Well, is that being manipulated, or is that you're being manipulated by rote? Because every one of these movies pretty much follows the same formula to a fairly close extent. I don't think. I mean, have we had
They're formulaic, and I still enjoy them. That's what pisses me off. Dude, I like a stripper that has a zit on her ass, because then I know she's a real human being, right?
I'll take your word for it.
Do you get what I'm saying? Like a real woman has imperfections. You know, even to bring this back to philosophy, Clausewitz writes about this. How like he writes about the perfect form of war, but at the same time that's never going to happen. There is no perfect form of war because there's the cloud of war, the fog of war. There's the whole investigation of both sides, and war never makes sense, even though it makes perfect sense. Real life has imperfection at its core. Perfect, like even though beauty is symmetrical, something perfectly symmetrical is not beautiful. It's boring. But when you look at beauty, the more symmetrical it is, the more beautiful it becomes. And something about those Marvel movies is just too perfect for me. There's nothing for me to sink my teeth into. It's like a saline drip shoved into my arm.
I think I see where you're coming from on this one. What's the saying? What's the Islamic saying? Rug maker leaves a imperfection on perfect, so as not to approach the perfection only found in heaven. That's on a similar theme, I think. Sorry if I went off on a tangent there, but
yeah, you're nailing it. It's like when I watch a Coen movie, there are so many flaws. There are so many problems with the movie. Like take Interstellar. Were the robots actually self-aware? They never even explored that question. They had these two robots in the movie, and they never explored the question, is the robot self-aware, or is it just a very good conversational artificial intelligence? There are so many flaws with that movie. There's so much speculation with that movie. You know, like is Leonardo DiCaprio, is he still in the dream at the end of the movie? You know, like there's all this stuff you can really dig your teeth into. Donnie Darko is nothing but a series of contradictions, okay? There is no sane, coherent narrative for that movie. I find it so damn compelling. But Marvel is just like, it's this fucking perfect hamburger.
I would say that it's almost like it's a physiological reaction that you get to these type of algorithmically created media.
It's like your wife is never going to be as hot as a stripper. Even though, you want your wife, not a stripper. Well, depending on the wife, of course. But generally speaking, if you married the bitch, she must have had some positive qualities. And, you know, my girlfriend pisses me off all the time, but she's a pretty good girlfriend. Overall, she's an excellent girlfriend, but she pisses me off sometimes. And it's like the prostitute or the whore or the stripper or the porn star, like very tempting, right? Because that's exactly what you want. But it's fucking fake.
Are we applying the uncanny valley to entertainment?
That's it. You know what? Marvel movies hit my uncanny valley. They are too damn perfect. They're like a woman made out of plastic.
It's like being overdosed with a ton of sugar.
Yeah, I've had friends argue that they end up watching some of the older superhero movies or shows more, and I think part of it is that they are more flawed. You know, I mean, to this day, Michael Keaton's Batman I enjoy far more than the Nolan movies, and part of that's the Nolan movies feel too grounded at times, but.
Well, didn't Nolan have it in his contract that there were no superpowers in this universe?
Yeah, I just well, the problem with the Nolan movies, and I enjoyed all three of them when I first saw them, but I enjoy them less and less every time I see them because it's like he tries so hard to be grounded that he sucks all the fun out of it at times. But it doesn't even truly succeed in being grounded. Like in the third one, like Batman gets his back fixed because of ancient Chinese secret. Like that's just it. It's just yeah, it's ancient Chinese secret. Fuck you. Like it doesn't even totally succeed in being grounded. So you sacrifice a lot of the fun, goofy stuff you can do for being sort of grounded, but not really, because it's still a fucking Batman movie. It's still at the very least a goofy, over the top action movie.
Though I wonder how much. Though I wonder how much of this is due to the result of it being an adaptation. So we have something to compare it to. Like Aurini, you were talking earlier about the Coen Brothers movies, and the one movie I've seen of theirs that I hated was The Lady Killers.
Oh, I didn't see that one.
I actually like that one a lot.
Did you see the original?
I never saw the original. No.
Yeah, it's got Alec Guinness in the Tom Hanks role, and instead of trying to stay aggressively goofy throughout, like with the irritable bowel syndrome jokes and the guy swallowing the cigarette, instead the movie actually takes a dark turn at around the 2/3 point, when they start killing each other off. Spoilers. So that's that. The original is just a much better movie because it lets itself get out of that. It basically lets itself change genres at around the 2/3 point, just to actually follow through on its own premise, and then it has the comedy denouement just for that catharsis at the end. But I don't know if I'd have disliked The Lady Killers as much if I'd not seen the original.
Well, I despise the movie World War Z, and that's because I read the book, and the book's one of the best novels of the last couple decades, at least.
Oh, it is. Read World War Z. I've read it twice. Yeah, it's great.
It's a fantastic. Just not only, it's probably the greatest zombie story I've ever seen, and like I said, it's one of the best novels I've ever read. And I hated the movie, but I knew people that never read the book and liked the movie. So if that movie wasn't called World War Z, I might have liked it.
It was just so offensive that they were calling it World War. I think I saw half of it before I got distracted by something else, and it was downright offensive. There's something I saw today on internet culture that Bechtloff is a little bit connected to. Didn't Bechtloff, about a year ago, didn't you request that SF Debris review the TNG episode?
Oh, that was probably 2 years ago now. Yeah, I sponsored a SF Debris episode.
Oh, nice.
I wanted him to review the Tin Man episode of TNG.
And he finally got around to it. What did you think?
Yeah. Well, I agree with him. It's not a particularly good episode, but I wish he got on it a little bit. But what I found very interesting about the episode was how much of a dick the telepath is, because being someone that can constantly read minds like that and can't even shut it off would kind of be a bit of a hell. Because first of all, you're hearing people's scattered thoughts before they ever say anything, but also you're hearing, I mean, everybody has dark and fucked up thoughts. Everybody has rude thoughts. I remember an old X-Men comic from the 90s where like they just showed Jean Grey like shopping for a day, and she sees all the fucked up thoughts that appear in people's heads. Like she asked some guy for directions and he's giving her directions, and at the same time he's thinking about her walking up and down his chest in stiletto heels. And like everybody she asked at the clothing store for advice, they're all like, "What a bitch! She's so skinny. I hate her." So yeah, there's something about the idea of being a telepath that definitely would have a rather dark side to it.
You're seeing everybody's sins, and I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I have a lot of dark thoughts that go through my head. It's like you never look at another man's portal gun, right? Like, yep. Take that times 100.
Yeah, take it where you can't help but look at everyone's portal gun.
Not just your portal gun, but like not just your browsing history, but every website you've thought about visiting.
But yeah, it was a good review. I'm glad he got around to it.
Oh, yeah, he kind of went in a different direction with it, talking about how he had to. That's the other interesting thing. He had to wait around for everybody to speak when he already knew what they were going to say.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people interpret this as being that people have these negative inclinations, but I think just as much as a telepath, you would actually see people going against these thoughts, or they aren't even really thoughts so much as thoughts about what, which isn't a negative inclination.
There is a woman I follow. She's a science fiction writer from Portugal. Maybe somebody in the comments can mention her name because I can't. It's not coming to memory right now. But she mentioned a book written. There's this book that she mentioned. There's this line written at the very beginning, and it said something like, "The old woman had lived in a small town for her entire life and never left it, so she knew about all types of evil." And she commented, like, people read this and it sounds like a joke. Like, this small little old lady living in a small town thinks she knows about evil, LOL. But the reality is that when you live in a small town, and she was discussing her own experience growing up in Portugal, you know everything. There aren't any secrets in the small town. So the guy that beat his wife, you know about that. And you watch them and you live next door to them for the next 20 years, and you see all the fallout. The woman that cheated on her husband and, you know, had a bastard. You know, you watch 20 years of fallout from that decision. You know, you really see evil in a small town in a way that we like to pretend doesn't exist in the big cities because, well, everybody's anonymous on Craigslist, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think is the author you're talking about Sarah Hoyt?
Sarah Hoyt. Thank you. It's what is it? According to Hoyt.com.
Yeah, she guest posts on Instapundit as well. In case any of you are boomer conish enough to read that.
Yeah, Hoyt. Thank you, Craig Ellen, in the comments. Yeah, she's a. I haven't read any of her books, so I can't say anything. But I really enjoy her writing, particularly because she is not like bona fides alt-right certified. No, she's Sarah Hoyt, and she writes stuff that interests her, and you know, she's a worldly, educated woman that has a lot of self-knowledge and a lot of knowledge about other people, and you know, knows that she's ignorant sometimes. I really enjoy her writing.
Well, if she's anything like Larry Corey, I like her. I like her blogging better than her actual fiction.
I'll agree with Coria. I prefer his blogging to his fiction.
Yeah.
Says the guy that also writes military sci-fi. So, you know what? That's a funny thing about writing is there's a very personal element to it, where, like you know, an example. Take the book and film American Psycho. I can't stand either of them. They are very good. I understand what the author is doing, but I can't stand. I barely made it through the movie, and I only read the first 2 chapters of the book before I threw it away in disgust. You know, not because it's a bad book, but just because I hate his writing style. It's a personal element to all of this. So wait, we've got Deep Space and Coriolanus on here, and you guys haven't spoken much. What was on your mind when you joined the chat?
Deep State, you go first, buddy.
We're not getting any audio from you, brother. Coriolanus, what's on your mind?
Oh, I was just I just had a thought there a while back. You guys were talking about the leftists and the government. I think it's going back to that one for a second. The thing about the left, and I'm pretty convinced of this, is that they push for total government control because they know on their own they can't survive without the government. They come from more of a parasitic standpoint in life. Like they always need a parent.
Liberals exist because right wingers suffer them to live.
It goes straight back to RK theory. You know, and last week I was mentioning Anonymous Conservative compared, like he pointed out that Charles Manson's his utopian philosophy that the blacks would murder all the whites, but the blacks are too stupid to run their own civilization. So after hiding in a magical valley, he and his followers would come back to rule over all the black and brown people, is the exact same philosophy that mainstream Democrats have when you get right down to it.
Well, you know, something to say to that is, and I'm pretty sure it can be a bit of a controversial viewpoint, but I tend to think that socialist governments, the actual inner circles of it, are more conservative. They have that little outbranch where they're like, the people need to be controlled, and so we're going to control them how we must, if that makes any sense.
To clarify, by socialist, you don't mean like Soviet, you mean just welfare state.
Yeah.
Sweden.
Yeah.
See, I would still argue that there's something deeply unbalanced about that. The need to control other people comes from
Oh, it
a
is for
lack
sure
of
unbalanced.
Yeah, it's a lack of control of the self. Whereas I think the K-type leader recognizes it as a necessary responsibility, not something they really want to do, but something that they need to do for the sake of others.
Anyone who craves power is probably unfit to wield it.
Think about the best supervisors you have in any sort of workplace. The best supervisors are the ones that, you know, part of them really just wants to go and do your job. They don't really want to be in charge of telling you what to do. Part of them just craves the simplicity of just having to jackhammer some concrete or tie some rebar or fire a rifle or whatever it might be that you're doing.
Well, in my experience, the best supervisors are the ones who leave you alone. Once they know you're competent to do the job on your own, they just wind you up and let you go.
Well, exactly, because they don't get off on managing you.
Well, a truly conservative leader or right-wing leader is somebody who recognizes your strengths, puts you where you are, and lets you go to town, and then that frees them up to carry on managing and placing people in proper stations elsewhere, right?
Well, I don't know if that's a conservative supervisor, but it's a good one.
I wouldn't find that the leftist supervisors would do that. They're the ones that are going to try to control every aspect.
Well, and this, you know, to like tie things back around, because we've been going for about 2 hours now. It's a good time to tighten things up. A lot of this goes back to self-control. I think the big something's coming down the tubes, but it's not going to be tiki torch rallies that make the difference. It's going to be self-mastery. It's going to be having control of yourself, having a good network of people around you, and yeah, and strengthening yourself every single day.
And
Say again?
And not carrying too much debt, because if what's coming down the pipeline is actually is the mother of all debt bubbles, then yeah, you don't want your entire life to be foreclosed on.
Yeah. Don't live a credit-based lifestyle. Don't try and be the cool guy. Don't engage in this narcissistic whatever. You know, I'll tell you what, like one example is I've been wanting to buy myself a new winter jacket for a few weeks now, and I haven't had the damn time to go buy one because I'm working too much. Hey, you know what? If people think I'm a loser because one of the buttons tore off my old winter jacket and I haven't had time to sew it back on, like, I give a fuck. I make more money than them.
A lot of people will always say, what do you do for the movement, or things like that. I'm not entirely sure whether that's even serious or not. I don't think anybody is. But the biggest thing to do for the movement is just to survive, have a family, and then be able to live on.
Exactly. It's taking care of yourself, of getting your affairs in order, whether it's like putting together a business or if it's just becoming an expert at whatever it might be that you are, where you become indispensable.
What are you doing for the movement?
Yeah, the movement is narcissism. That's like asking what you're doing for the goth scene. The more you're doing for the goth scene, the less you're doing for humanity.
But how many people have you gotten arrested for the movement?
How hard have you made it for anybody else to agree with you?
I think when you say something like, what are you doing for the movement, that ties into a kind of a life motto I live by. It's the fastest way to fall behind is to think what everyone else is thinking of you.
You know, and to tie it back into the title,
just
and I'm
don't
going to
do
end on this because this is beautiful, is what people hate about America, what Canadians and Europeans and Australians, what they hate about America is the fact that America is self-sufficient. The fact that Americans have the right to bear arms. The fact that Americans have a relatively low tax rate. The fact that housing and food is cheap in America and that you have to pay for your own damn health care. That's what people hate about America. It's the self-sufficiency. And what they should hate about America is the lack of self-sufficiency. They should be hating the homeowners associations. They should be hating the cell phone plans. They should be hating the brand new iPhone X every couple of years. They should be hating the dependents and the welfare state. They hate the good part of America and love the bad part of America because most people need to be called. And there I go talking hate speech again. Any last thoughts? Left to right. Coriolanus, starting with you.
Last thoughts. Get out there, make your lives worth something, and get as independent as humanly possible of government system.
Duel?
Don't just follow ideas. Be a person. And being a person is really what society is.
Grayscale?
If you don't know their last name, use a condom.
Yep. And Bechtloff.
Go subscribe to my VidMe channel and my YouTube channel and follow me on Gab and follow me on Facebook and support my Patreon and send me shekels on the PayPal and every other self-serving, self-promotional thing I forgot to say.
And speaking of, thank you to all of my backers on Patreon. This is why, guys, I worked, 112 hours over the past 2 weeks? I'm getting some sweet freaking overtime. And I still did 4 live streams, and I'm working on an analysis of On War by Clausewitz. And I sat around playing Subnautica all day today because I'm freaking exhausted. So go out there and kick some ass. Get your act together. Kick some ass. Get some money flowing through your life. Get some wisdom. Get some knowledge. Go make some contacts. Go become a better version of you. That is how we win. Democrats are all about being losers. They're all about being weak and pathetic and whining that the other guy has more and that some institution is nickel and diming them. Boo hoo fucking who. The solution? Go out and earn more bank. Kick some ass this week, folks. Deus Volt Thank you very much for listening. God bless all of you, and this is Aurini out.